Imagine losing control of a 100,000-pound machine, heading straight for a line of cars. That was my reality. Picture this: a quiet winter morning, the road stretched out ahead of me, the weight of 100,000 pounds of machinery in my hands. I was used to the responsibility, used to controlling the uncontrollable. But as I crested that hill, something felt wrong. The kind of wrong you can't explain, only sense. What happened next? It's the reason I still wake up sweating in the middle of the night. It's the story I'll never forget, and neither will you. I've spent over a decade operating heavy machinery, machines that weigh as much as buildings and demand precision, focus, and control. To most, the sheer size and power of this equipment are unimaginable. But to me, it was just another day on the job. I knew the risks, understood the challenges, and thought I'd seen it all. But what happened that icy winter morning was unlike anything I'd ever faced. This isn't just a story about machines or icy roads. It's about how, in the blink of an eye, a routine day can transform into something unthinkable. And how, despite all your experience, some moments can leave you utterly powerless. My day started like any other, with a job I'd done countless times before, moving a Caterpillar D9 bulldozer. This isn't just any machine. It's a 100,000-pound beast of steel and power, built to reshape landscapes. Transporting it requires precision and trust in every component: the tractor, the trailer, the chains holding it all together. That day, I was using an old tractor from the 1980s, pulling a drop trailer designed for this kind of load. Both were functional, reliable in their time, but showing their age, creaks, groans, and quirks that you learn to account for. Everything was double-checked. The dozer was secured, the route planned. I set off, confident in my experience. But there was one part of the route I always dreaded: a steep hill leading to a blind intersection. Locals knew it well. The stoplight at the bottom of the hill seemed perfectly positioned to catch drivers off guard, especially in bad weather. That morning, the conditions were unforgiving. Ice covered the road like an invisible trap, the kind that looks harmless until it isn't. The hill was long and deceptive, rising gently before dropping sharply. And from the top, you couldn't see what waited below. Traffic? An accident? Nothing at all. You wouldn't know until you were already committed to the descent. It was a road that demanded respect, but even respect wasn't always enough. As I approached the hill, the air felt colder, heavier. I eased off the accelerator, just as I always did before a steep decline. I thought I was prepared, but nothing could prepare me for what lay beyond that crest. As I neared the hill, my CB radio suddenly crackled to life. The voice on the other end was frantic, cutting in and out with static. Words came through in fragments: slow accident, traffic, hill. The urgency in their tone was clear, but the message was broken, leaving me piecing together what little I could. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Something was wrong, but I couldn't see it. Out of caution, I eased off the accelerator. My hands gripped the wheel a little tighter as the tractor hummed its way up the incline. The faint groan of the engine filled the cabin, the sound oddly comforting against the unknown ahead. The crest of the hill approached. I glanced at my mirrors, the chains holding the bulldozer secure, the trailer steady. Everything looked fine, but then I crested the hill, and the world seemed to shift. There it was, a mess of cars scattered across the road below. Some were at odd angles, hazard lights flashing in a chaotic rhythm. In the middle of it all, the mangled remains of a fresh accident. My heart sank as I saw the traffic stretched far up the hill, a line of vehicles completely stopped. I had only seconds to process what I was seeing, but one thought stood out above all others. I wasn't going to be able to stop in time. My trailer, my truck, my 100,000-pound load, it was all moving too fast, with too little space to slow down. I pressed the brake pedal hard. The truck shuddered. The trailer chains clinked under the strain, but the icy road didn't care. I was heading straight for that line of cars, and in that moment, I knew I was running out of options. I pressed the brake harder, hoping the tires would bite into the icy road, but instead, the truck shuddered violently. The brakes groaned in protest, and I could feel the weight of the bulldozer behind me pushing harder with every second. I started downshifting, trying to let the engine help slow me down, but it wasn't enough. Then I hit the first ice patch. The truck's tires skidded, jerking the entire cab to the side. My hands clamped the steering wheel as the trailer began to sway unnaturally. The clinking of the chains grew louder, sharp metallic notes against the growing chaos. I glanced at my side mirror and saw nothing. My stomach dropped, whipping my head around to the passenger mirror. The blood drained from my face. The trailer had swung out completely, and I was staring at the full side profile of the bulldozer and trailer, something I should never see from the driver's seat. I was jackknifing, the trailer breaking free from the alignment it was supposed to hold. The sound was deafening, the screech of tires struggling for grip, the fifth wheel clanking under the strain, and the rhythmic groan of the chains straining to hold the load together. Each sound was a reminder that I was losing control. I hit another patch of ice, and the truck lurched again. The trailer swung even further, and for a moment, the entire rig seemed to slide as one massive, uncontrollable force. My mind raced, but my body felt frozen. This was no longer about trying to stop. This was about surviving the inevitable. I couldn't stop looking at the mirrors, watching helplessly as the trailer's movements became wilder, more erratic. My heart pounded as a singular, chilling thought took hold. This is it. This is how I die. And worse, I'm going to take others with me. Desperation took over. I laid on the horn, a futile attempt to warn the cars ahead. The blaring sound echoed down the hill, a cry for help that I knew wouldn't be enough. My hands moved instinctively, trying to correct the steering, but the ice beneath me made it clear I wasn't driving anymore. I was a passenger in a 100,000-pound disaster. I held the horn down, the deafening blare cutting through the chaos ahead. I could see people in the stopped cars looking around, confused, their heads turning toward the hill. They didn't have time to process what was happening. Some jumped out of their vehicles, abandoning them entirely, running frantically to the side of the road. From my vantage point, it was chaos, a blur of people moving, hazard lights flashing, and cars scattered in every direction. But my truck kept sliding, the weight of the bulldozer pushing it forward relentlessly. Every second felt like an eternity. The brakes groaned, the tires screamed against the ice, and I clung to the wheel, praying for the impossible. And then it happened. The truck shuddered violently and came to a grinding halt. For a moment, I couldn't process what had just occurred. The entire rig stopped just a few feet from the last car in the line of traffic. I mean feet. I could have stepped off the truck's bumper and touched the car in front of me. The silence that followed was almost louder than the chaos had been. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My entire body was trembling, drenched in sweat despite the freezing temperature outside. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. I sat there, staring at the scene ahead, unable to move. Disbelief washed over me. How had I stopped? How had I not crushed those cars, or the people who had just run for their lives? I couldn't answer those questions. I could barely breathe. The relief was overwhelming, but it didn't feel comforting. I was alive, and so were they, but the weight of what could have happened hung heavily over me. I wasn't safe yet. The trailer was jackknifed, blocking the entire road, and the ice still threatened every movement. But for now, the truck was still, and no one was hurt. That alone felt like a miracle. As I sat there, trying to catch my breath, I heard shouting. Drivers who had abandoned their cars were pointing up the hill, their voices sharp with panic. I followed their gaze, and my stomach dropped for the second time that day. Another truck had appeared at the top of the hill, a massive tractor-trailer hauling a tank. I could see its tires skidding, the trailer starting to sway, the driver frantically trying to regain control. The scene was all too familiar, but this time I wasn't behind the wheel. I was an observer, powerless to stop what was unfolding. I didn't think twice. I opened the door and bolted from my truck, running as far as I could to the side of the road. My eyes stayed locked on the second truck as it careened down the icy hill. The driver was doing everything right, horn blaring, brake lights flashing, but the road was unforgiving. The trailer swayed dangerously, edging closer to a full jackknife. My heart raced as I thought, this is going to be it. It's going to hit my truck, or worse, those cars. Time slowed as the second truck skidded closer and closer, sliding toward disaster. And then, somehow, the impossible happened. The driver regained just enough control to slow the truck, inch by inch, until it came to a stop. It didn't just stop, it pulled up perfectly, parallel to my rig. The two trucks stood side by side, both blocking the road, but miraculously, no one had been hurt. I could see the driver in the cab, his head in his hands, shaking just as much as I was moments before. He had come just as close to disaster as I had. I didn't know whether to cry or collapse from relief. It's moments like these that remind you how fragile life can be, how quickly control can slip away. If you've ever had a moment where time felt like it stopped, where you thought everything was about to fall apart, share it in the comments. And if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We bring you more gripping true life tales every week. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The world felt eerily still as both trucks sat frozen on the hill, blocking the road like silent giants. I stood there, catching my breath, my legs trembling as if they could give out at any moment. The driver of the second truck climbed out of his cab, and our eyes met. No words were needed. The look on his face mirrored my own. Pure horror, mixed with overwhelming relief. We didn't speak, we didn't have to. We both knew how close we had come to something unspeakable. Around us, the chaos slowly settled. Drivers who had abandoned their cars cautiously returned, surveying the scene. Some offered a kind word, patting me on the back, their faces showing gratitude that we had all somehow survived. Others, understandably shaken, shouted in frustration about the blocked road. I could barely process their words. My mind was still replaying the moment over and over. I sat on the side of the road, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Sweat dripped down my face despite the biting cold. I tried to make sense of it, but there was nothing to make sense of. It had been too close. Inches. Seconds. One mistake, one small shift in the ice, and the outcome would have been devastating. The weight of it hit me like a wave. If I had been going just a few miles per hour faster, or if I had hit a slightly larger ice patch, it wouldn't have mattered how hard I tried. Those cars at the bottom of the hill wouldn't have stood a chance. The people who ran from their vehicles would have had nowhere to run. I still think about that day. The sound of the chains, the screech of the tires, the sight of people abandoning their cars, all of it stays with me. And every time I remember it, I ask myself, what if? Because if a single detail had been different, just one thing, this would have been a story of tragedy, not survival. Now, I want to hear from you. What's the scariest experience you've ever faced on the road? Was it icy conditions, a near miss, or something you'll never forget? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to read it. And if this story gave you chills, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps more people discover these incredible, true life stories. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We bring you gripping, heart-stopping tales every week. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Speaking of next, our upcoming story dives into a nighttime emergency that no one saw coming. It's a tale of survival that will leave you questioning everything. Stay tuned.